Chapter 18, Ground Transportation. Romans 13:1. Let everyone be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except that which God has established. The authorities that exist have been established by God. One of the issues I had to deal with regularly was ground transportation. Groups flying in and out needed rides to and from the airport. Fuel supplies needed to be bought and delivered to the dock at Ibo. Taitu had a SUV, and the McFarlanes had arrived with 2 trucks and their landing craft. When we needed some supplies, I could often catch a ride into Port-au-Prince with one of the trucks. When we had a group coming in or out, we could sometimes coordinate and go in one of the trucks. But normally, I would hire Lundy and his truck for runs into Port-au-Prince. Lundy was the fellow that rode the policeman out to the boat the first time we came to Ibo. If you looked at Lundy from a North American perspective, you would assume he spent a good part of his day at the gym. He didn't. He just worked very hard. He had an old truck that he made his living with. It had an enclosed cage on the back that was secure for moving 50-pound sacks of rice or groups of up to 6 people and their bags. The truck was good for groups because from the sides it was hard to see what was inside. There was significant unrest in Haiti, and you just didn't want everyone to know what or who you had in the back. Sometimes we would load so much rice and other materials into the truck, I would be convinced something would break, and sometimes things did break on that old truck. Other times we did fuel runs, filling drums of diesel up in the back of the truck and wrestling them out onto the dock and down into the skiff. We would then pump fuel up into the boat's tanks. There were no fuel docks to pull up to in Haiti. I spent a lot of time with Lundy and had great trust in him. In those days, burning roadblocks with angry mobs was normal. You prayed for a clear route into town, and then again back to get out. One day we were picking up a load of rice in Port-au-Prince, plus doing some other running around errands. We had started early, but it was getting late. We needed to be out of town and hopefully back before dark. I did not want to be out on the roads after dark in those days. The problem was that there were burning roadblocks everywhere that day. We could not find a way to get out of Port-au-Prince. The main ingredient of the burning roadblocks was old tires. It never ceased to amaze me that with all the burning roadblocks that were set up, the supply of old tires never ran low. In my mind, I was running through options of where we could go if we were trapped for the night. We needed the truck to be out of sight. It was full of bags of rice. If it was after dark, the rice would be all taken. We were about to make a decision to head to a mission that handled adoptions located in the northern part of Port-au-Prince when Lundy saw a small opening. Fire was still burning across the road, but the mob was all off to one side and the tires were getting close to being burned out, with the flames not being solid and under 1 foot high right in the middle. Lundy went for it, and before anyone could react, we were through and speeding for home. What Ingrid and I liked least about me going on these runs to Port-au-Prince was that we could not communicate. Cell phones did not yet exist in Haiti. When we had someone on the boat and others within a mile or so of the boat, we used portable radios to communicate. But when I had a problem in Port-au-Prince and was late, everyone in Ibo was left wondering where I was. Only once did I not make it back until after dark. A flight bringing in a group from Florida was extremely late. I was driving one of the trucks from the mission center, and when Ingrid talked to Taitu about me being past due, he headed out to look for me. We met on the narrow dirt track coming in off the main road, and all was well. Chapter 19. modesty, and dress codes. Genesis 3:7. Then the eyes of both of them were opened, and they realized that they were naked. So they sewed fig leaves together and made coverings for themselves. One thing you can say, Haiti has plenty of its heat. Not only is Haiti very hot, it is hot and humid. The people are poor, and no one has a closet full of clothes. When around their own area, women often were not what you would call fully clothed. They may be bathing in the creek half naked, working in the yard topless, or wandering around unbuttoned. Some were very beautiful young ladies, and some were not young. They were grandmothers. Ingrid and I were used to it, but when we had guests, I would explain that it was their responsibility to give privacy and respect by looking away. Fortunately, when we had guests, the women were more modest. I suppose that this tells us about how comfortable the people were with us. We used to talk with CMOM board members about the lack of clothes someday. Most of them had been on board with us and thought we were exaggerating. One day after that, one of them was with us in Opak. We were ashore, well away from the main village in a section called Sorouche. It was peanut season. The houses had peanuts spread out, drying in the sun before going to market. I had been told there was a woman in the area who needed some meds. As we walked up to the group of shacks, a woman came forward to us from tending to the peanuts. Now she had a dress on, but the top half of it was unbuttoned and folded down in front of her like an apron. She thought nothing of it, as she was used to us and was doing work in the hot sun and was focused on getting help for her child who was sick with a fever. Ingrid and I were quite used to it, but the director was feeling very uncomfortable and was struggling with how to greet her and visit with her. Needless to say, our board never doubted our comments in this area again. I think perhaps the most amusing incident occurred at Ibo. There was a woman in her mid-20s who had a very nasty and sizable abscess in her left breast. She could best be described as very well endowed. I gave her some antibiotics to fight the infection and some cream that was meant to draw the abscess out and help it drain. I didn't think much more about it, although I did have some concerns that what I had done for her may not be enough. We headed out on a run a day or two later and were gone for a couple of weeks. After returning to Ibo, I was on the shoreline when I heard her calling from a distance, "David, David, kade? David, David, look." I turned to look, and there she was running down the beach topless toward me, holding out her breasts for me to see. I have to say I was at a loss as to what to do. The abscess, however, was completely healed. While on the topic of clothing, we should talk about diapers. It appeared that they didn't exist in Haiti. They did, but no one used them. Babies and young children up to the age of around 5 years old wore just a top and no bottoms. Why do I bring this up, you may wonder? Children like to ride on our shoulders and sit on our laps. Combine this with the fact that there were no toilets or bathrooms anywhere in the villages. Children, and adults too, just squatted in the bushes, and no, there was no such thing as toilet paper. It was Ed who first put the rule in place with the children. No underwear or bottoms on meant no riding on shoulders or sitting on laps. In our schools, students were required to wear uniforms. For example, in our law school, the girls wore yellow and white check tops and a gray shirt. The boys wore shirts that matched the girls' tops and had gray shorts. Without the uniform requirements, you would have half-dressed kids at school. When it came to dressing for church, Haitian customs were far more rigid than in North America. Women had to have their heads covered and wear nice clean dresses. Men would wear long pants, button-up shirts, and closed shoes. This was all very nice, but not terribly practical. These people were poor, they lived in grass huts with mud floors, and they had to walk down muddy trails and cross wide creeks to get us to church. If someone was a follower of Christ but could not dress correctly, customs dictated they would not be able to go to church without being ostracized. Estemi lived in a grass hut on the beach in Laakwo. When we had come to Laakwo for the first time after arriving in Haiti, Estemi had been the very first person to paddle out in his dugout to meet us. He was a fisherman and lived with his old mother. We always called her Mama Estemi, and a niece, Sheila, mentioned in an earlier section in relation to worms. We hired Estemi to work with us a few hours every morning when we were there for the first while. We were stripping and resealing parts of our deck, and he was helping us, but the real reason we had him was to help us to learn Creole. He was to be the first person to come to Christ through our mission. There was a small church a long walk from the area Estemi lived. We worked with them often. We followed up with Estemi, and he told us that he could not attend church because he had no suitable clothes. We checked back with Pastor Herod at the church, and he explained that of course he could not attend church without dressing properly. We were amazed at this legalistic attitude that outward appearance was more important than working to save the lost and bringing them into the body of Christ. We did two things. We got Estemi some acceptable clothes and started dealing with the church on love versus legalism. Estemi went on to become a leader in the church. We would see him leading church teams into the mountains to pray over the sick. The church, we would learn as we spent more time there, had their issues with converts that did not fit their mold. It seemed they had issues forgiving those that God had forgiven, or had problems believing that God had changed them. We would work with this church for years, dealing with cultural attitudes like this. Chapter 20, Work Cycles and Other Challenges. Acts 21:33. The commander came up and arrested him and ordered him to be bound with 2 chains. Then he asked who he was and what he had done. Our rotation in and out of Haiti had a cycle dictated by boat maintenance needs, as well as the need to return regularly to keep finances coming in. We operated on a 14-month cycle because that was the longest we could go between dry dock work. Being a wooden-hulled boat, we were always conscious of the risk of teredo worms. If the bottom paint was thin or scratched off, there was a risk that teredos could burrow into the wood hull. That would be bad. In each cycle, our stay in Haiti would last 12 months. After 12 months in Haiti, we would run through the Bahamas to Florida, and after 2 months return. In the beginning, we would have a small volunteer crew on board to help out on the trip, but we discovered that we needed to take some family alone time each year, and our passage through the Bahamas became our annual family vacation time. My family was now pretty experienced at running the boat. By the time he was 10, our son Jordan knew the navigation systems. He knew charts and maps, he knew the anchor system, and knew how to start up the motors in the engine room. I suspected Jordan could take charge of the boat if needed. Ingrid could handle the boat at sea in any conditions. The only challenge to anybody else running the boat other than me would be docking. Bringing in 75 feet of boat weighing more than 80 tons to a dock between fancy yachts was always a fun job. Add a crosswind and a current, and it was just a bundle of fun. The trick was to carry sufficient speed into the dock, which also added to the adrenaline rush. Quite often, when we were in Florida, people who knew what we did would ask us how our break was going. I would always be quietly annoyed by this. Don't get me wrong, it was great being in Florida, but it was far from being a break. It took enormous organizing and planning to bring it all together, and a lot of hard work to get it all done. Each visit included 1 week in dry dock. We did all the work ourselves with the church work team helping put the new bottom paint on. The boat hull was wood and had to be scraped completely clean and then examined in detail. All the plank seams needed checking, and there were always some seams that needed recalking. It was always a frantic week. After dry dock was complete, we would begin the loading process. First, water and fuel tanks would be filled, then we would load our food and necessities, and finally freight. Loading the boat for its return to Haiti was always a challenge. We carried everything over the years. Some of what we carried was for our work projects, and some was for other mission organizations. Anything we could carry, we would, and we would never charge for this service. One particular trip, it would be safe to say that our eyes were bigger than our stomach, as the expression goes. When one of our friends asked for help getting supplies into Haiti, it just went against our nature to say no, so we just kept on saying yes. Our own supplies for the year were on board already, or so we thought, and we were waiting for a delivery from Canada. Our friends at Clean Water for Haiti had arranged with another friend from Canada to deliver a trailer load of materials to the dock in Florida. This trailer, as it turned out, was loaded. 55-gallon drums of dried foods from a Gleaner organization, used outboard motors, a complete well drilling system, and literally a ton of other things, including a kitchen sink. We were full and ready to leave. Then God did one of his usual things to make life interesting. The Home Depot decided to donate a load of lumber to us. A supporter had gone to Home Depot and told them about our building projects. As a result, a trailer showed up at the marina loaded with lumber for us to take to Haiti for the church school roof in Opor. We were already full, but there was simply no way I could refuse this gift, so we brought it all on board. We stacked it on the top decks, we strapped it down all along side decks, we stuffed it down into the aft cabins. It was everywhere. We could say we were loaded, but the truth is we were well past loaded. We were overloaded, and much of our weight was too high on the boat. We were dangerously top-heavy. The Tikhoneh was well down past its normal waterline, but it was our center of gravity that concerned me. To be safe, we needed calm seas, but there were miles of open water between us and Haiti. Departure day arrived, but the Gulf Stream was too rough for the load we had, so we chose a different route. Down the intercoastal waterway to Miami, and then 50 miles across to Bimini. This cut the Gulf Stream crossing distance in half, and delayed our crossing by a day, giving us better weather. We had a fairly calm crossing, but even in the gentle swell, we could feel the sluggishness in the roll of the boat. When we rolled, the boat would hesitate in the roll before coming back to upright. This was a scary problem. Normally, there was nothing calm about the 28-hour passage from the southeast corner of the Bahama Banks through the Windward Passage to Haiti. To make this crossing, we would need calm seas in an area that was rarely calm. We did the only thing we could. We traveled through the Bahamas to the shelter of an island near edge of the bank and anchored. The rest was up to God. We would simply wait on Him, checking the forecast several times a day. We needed the easterly trade winds to drop to under 10 knots and the seas to be below 4 feet. The forecasts were for 25-knot easterlies with waves at 8 to 10 feet. So we waited. A week came and went and nothing changed. We began to wonder if this was doable. Then one morning at 6 a.m., the shortwave radio weathermen announced calm seas and winds for 24 hours. The anchor came up and we were underway in minutes. Although we were anxious to get back to Haiti, there were a lot worse places that we could be stuck than waiting in the Bahamas. When we first traveled through the Bahamas, we always enjoyed snorkeling on the reefs. In Florida, a man from church blessed me with a collection of scuba diving gear, and we installed a dive tank compressor on the boat to fill dive tanks. The scuba gear was great in the Bahamas and was used most Saturday mornings in Haiti. Between deserted beaches and untouched reefs to scuba dive on, our time waiting for weather was not a hardship. My children were 9 years old when they learned to scuba dive. Remember that they were raised on a boat. They were as waterproof as any kids could be. They lived in the water, and I never had to worry about them getting into trouble. They could both free dive to more than 40 feet and could prove it by coming up with a handful of the bottom. Jordan would scuba dive with me regularly, but Karina was a fanatic. She loved deep dives on steep banks and walls and had no fear down at 185 feet, which was our deepest dive. She used to tell me, "Daddy, I am not afraid unless you tell me I should be." One day we were diving on a 1,000-foot wall that started its vertical drop beginning at 85 feet, about 2 miles from shore. We were on the sandy bottom at 85 feet near the wall drop-off when she came across a 5-foot wide stingray laying on the bottom and approached it slowly. She lay on the bottom, facing the ray, and patting it gently on its forehead for about 5 minutes. If its stinger tail came up, she would stop, then start again when he lowered it. Directly overhead, about 30 feet above us, a large shark quietly circling, watching it all. Karina was content. There were no cares or fears. For a number of years, when we headed to Florida, we would leave Haiti heading directly north for 2 hours before turning west, heading directly toward the bottom of the Jumento chain of islands at the southeastern corner of the Bahamas. The purpose of running straight north for a few hours before making the turn towards the Bahamas was to get clear of the windward passes, which could be a nasty stretch of water between Haiti and Cuba. We learned this lesson through experience during the earlier years in Haiti. From the point of Haiti to the beginning on the Bahama bank was a 28-hour run. From there, we would run northwest again in shallow water between 7 and 30 feet deep, across the banks using the island chain for cover. And then, near the Extremas, we would turn west again towards Nassau and customs clearance. After clearing customs in Nassau, we would head north to the Abaco area, then cross the Gulf Stream to Fort Pierce. One year, when we were on our way across the banks heading to Florida, we had a large Bahamas Defense Force patrol boat hail us on the radio, right at the point that we were making the turn near the Extremas. We were asked where we were coming from and where we were going. I answered that we were out of Haiti heading to customs in Nassau. We were doing everything properly, including a yellow quarantine flag up on the mast. As a foreign vessel, we had the right of free passage through the Bahamian waters until we reached the custom office. He asked who was on board, and then asked if we had any weapons on board. I declared the .303 rifle and our .357 revolver. He then told us he was sending a boarding party over to check the weapons. A lieutenant came over in an inflatable with a boarding party. He checked the guns and did a quick search and radioed his captain back, and then came to talk to us. He explained that we were being detained and ordered us into Farmers Key, which was several miles away. We complied and took the boat to Farmers Key with the boarding party still on board. We tied up to the docks across from the patrol boat. Then they searched the boat in extreme detail and of course found nothing. I never met the captain of the patrol boat, and he would not talk to me directly, only through his lieutenant. When they were done, the lieutenant came to us and told us we were being placed under arrest. I asked on what charge, and he said carrying undeclared weapons. I explained that we had declared the guns over the radio. He just shrugged. He read our rights to Ingrid and me and both of our children, and explained that as it was getting dark, we would be held under armed guard on the boat for the night, and that in the morning a chartered plane with a police officer would fly in to take custody of us and fly us to Georgetown. Talking to our guard that night, it was clear that the crew disagreed with their captain. He said they had pulled a boat over the previous week and let it go. That same boat was pulled over later by another patrol who found people on board that were being smuggled. The captain had gotten into trouble for missing it, so now he was acting rashly and had us under arrest and was seizing our boat. We had a new satellite phone in our room, and I quietly called Common Ground in Fort Pierce to let them know what was happening. The next morning, the plane arrived with the policemen who took custody of us, and off we flew to Georgetown. The police officer took us to the head immigration officer's office and turned custody of us over to immigration. The immigration officer questioned us, then looked at our papers and cleared us into the country. He said there was no basis for the arrest or charges and released us. Someone from Common Ground knew the immigration officer in Abaco, who called Georgetown and explained who we were and what we did. The problem was that we were now in Georgetown, but the boat was in Farmers Key. We were told that we would have to charter our own plane to get back to the boat. We did. When we landed, some of the locals picked us up to drive us to the boat. They apologized for how their country had treated us. Having flown into Georgetown and seeing the anchorage, we decided to pass through there on the return to Haiti. This opened up a whole new experience for us. Georgetown is at the eastern edge of the main Bahama Bank. For us, it was a straight 40-hour run in the open ocean from the northeast tip of Haiti to Georgetown. It became a regular stop on our runs between Florida and Haiti. This did mean more open ocean travel than the former route. Georgetown had the nickname Chicken Harbor. During the winter season, you would find as many as 400 boats in the anchorages. During summer hurricane season, there might be 15 boats. You could get to Georgetown from anywhere on the east coast of the U.S. without having to sail in any real ocean conditions. Boats came down the U.S. coast via the Intercoastal Waterway, then jumped across the Gulf Stream from Florida to the Bahamas Bank. This jump was as little as 50 miles if you crossed from Miami to Bimini. The boats would then stay on the shallow calm banks all the way to Georgetown. If you were heading to the Caribbean, this was the logical route. When you headed on eastward from Georgetown, you headed into open ocean for the first time. The trade winds, and thus the seas, were right on your nose. It was not a run for the faint of heart, and many boats passing through Georgetown turned around fairly quickly after experiencing this reality for a few hours. and returned to harbor never to venture farther, thus the Chicken Harbor name. We met many people in Georgetown over the years. One couple, we will call them the Smiths, to give them a privacy, lived in the anchorage for more than a year. He worked as a construction foreman at a huge resort being built nearby. We became good friends during our break in Georgetown, and they were fascinated by our work. They were professed Christians, and they told us one day that they had not tithed anywhere on the money he had been making there. They wanted to give the tithe to us to help finish our school construction project. They gave us 10,000 US dollars. Mr. Smith had one request. They were planning to sail from Georgetown to the Turks and Caicos Islands and then south to Luperon, which was on the north coast of the Dominican Republic, a short hop from the Haitian border. We had never gone this route and agreed to travel with the two boats together. I asked him if he had ever sailed in the open ocean. He said yes. He had sailed the boat to Georgetown. I tried unsuccessfully to explain the difference. The day came to depart. Our first run was out to Ackland Island, where we could drop anchor behind a point of land. For us, it was a normal day at sea, a bit windy and lumpy, but nothing unusual for us. They were in a nice 45-foot sailboat. It should have been no problem. We had sailed our 29-foot sailboat off the west coast of Canada, an open ocean far worse than this. They struggled the whole way, but finally made it. We anchored off the point of Ackland Island and had a magnificent dive on a 2,000-foot wall with 100-foot overhangs. Around 10 p.m. that night, we pulled our anchors and headed out into the night. It got windier, and the seas grew. Welcome to ocean travel. The seas grew to about 12 to 13 feet by morning, a bit wet and bouncy, but doable. They had a horrendous time. He became violently seasick and could not function. She took the wheel, but did not know navigation. We lit ourselves up like a Christmas tree, and she followed us through the night. We eventually made it back to Provincial in the Caicos Islands and took a few days there. But Jordan and I needed some medical help while there. I had thrown my back out badly while shackling the skiff onto the stern and needed a chiropractor, and Jordan was having an allergic reaction to some meds he had taken. We got all those needs taken care of while there. As we were leaving there to head to South Caicos, the other boat had engine issues and had to turn back. We had a strict time limit on the number of days we could be in the Caicos to avoid a steep clearance fee. We had to get to South Caicos and get our clearance abound before our time expired. We agreed we would meet them there. It was an easy sail across the banks. The Smiths were boarded by customs and the police after we departed, and their boat was searched. They had a problem with customs regarding some undeclared items, and they were delayed there several days. We could not wait and agreed to meet in Luperon. Karina and I had time for a quick dive on the famous South Caicos Wall. Then we were off to sail through the night to Luperon. Chapter 21. Christmas and Other Special Days. Ecclesiastes 3:13. That each of them may eat and drink and find satisfaction in all their toil. This is the gift of God. When we pulled into Luperon, Christmas was approaching. I have many memories of Christmases during our time on the boat. Ingrid's organizational skills were impressive. Each time we left Florida, we would be gone for a full year. While in Florida, Ingrid would organize all the birthdays and Christmas celebrations. She would pack gifts away. She would set aside cake mixes for birthday cakes and icing. and would have things like Christmas dinner organized before we left the dock in Florida. This way, wherever we were when Christmas or a birthday came along the way, we were ready. We bought some food locally in Haiti, such as fruits and veggies, but one thing we did not buy locally was meat. I had a group visiting from the U.S. wonder why there was no meat to eat on board. I took the group into a covered market in Petit Guave and told them they could pick out whatever meat they wanted. I would get it and they could have it for dinner. Now, Petit Guave rarely had electricity, and this lack of power included the market area. No electricity means no refrigeration. As we approached the meat section, we could see meat hanging on hooks and other cuts laying on dirty concrete countertops. As we got closer, the meat seemed to shimmer in the light, but this mystery soon resolved itself when the flies all took off at once as we got too close. The group decided without a hesitation that no meat was just fine. We did, however, buy shrimp, lobster, and conch from local fishermen at very reasonable prices. I tell you this so that you understand why there was no turkey for Christmas dinner. But we did have stashed away with some canned hams, cans of cranberries, and other treats. We even had a little Christmas tree to set up in the dining area of the boat. Over the years, we were in various spots for Christmas. Mostly we were in Haiti, but we managed 1 year in Florida, 1 year in the Bahamas, and 1 in Luperon in the Dominican Republic. Luperon is a major hurricane hole in the boating world. It has a totally enclosed, secure harbor. As a result, it attracts many cruising sailors who spend hurricane seasons there, as well as being a major stop en route to the Caribbean. We spent about a week there before making the jump over to Haiti. Some places give you a good feeling when you are visiting, and others do not. The anchorage in Georgetown had a positive feel. In fact, the boaters there met on the beach Sunday mornings to do their own church service, and there was a strong family focus among the cruisers. People from the boats gathered in the afternoon on shore to play card and board games. It was a very social and friendly place. Luperon had a dark feel about it. Luperon was not very social other than gathering in local bars. The main topic in the cruisers' newsletter was about the quality of the local prostitutes, not a family atmosphere. There was a woman from one of the boats that tried to do something for the local children wherever she was at Christmas. She looked for help among the boaters to organize a Christmas party for the local kids. Of all the boats at anchor, only Ingrid was willing to help out. No other boats were interested, but the two of them put on a party and the local children came. 1 year in Haiti, we had an idea on how we could bless some of the people in the villages for Christmas. One of the major problems in Haiti was water. In the larger towns, there was running water, sometimes. For example, Fred's Happy House was located in Tiglav, and it theoretically had running water. It also theoretically had electricity, but power was only on sporadically. Usually, 1 or 2 hours a day, unless they ran out of diesel for the city's generators, then there might be a week or more with no power. The water was the same, sporadic, so they filled tanks when it was on. The smaller towns or villages may have a well that people walk to fill jugs of water that they carried home. Much as you can read about it in some of the stories in the Bible. Some of the wells were contaminated, and some areas used river water, which was rarely safe. We had a friend named Tal from British Columbia who ran an organization called Clean Water for Haiti. They made water filtration systems designed for household use in third world countries. These units were made of concrete on site. They were about 4 feet tall and about 1 foot square, with various sand layers inside that filtered and purified the water. Tal and I made a deal. We would put a water filter system in every house compound in the waterfront and backwoods areas, as these areas had no access to clean well water. Tal and I split the cost of the project, and we built them on site, painted all sorts of bright colors, and had them ready for Christmas. The people were trained in how to use and maintain them, and Tal would stop by to check on them regularly. These systems had a major impact on the health of the folks in the area. My estimate was that our medical costs for medicines went down by about 40% by getting them clean water. It was a Merry Christmas indeed.